PK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast, Mind Unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast.
Future Proof Knowledge Podcast, episode 49. We are live. I hope everybody has been keeping well and surviving the heat that you may be experiencing, because both myself and Olive, just before we came live, were talking about how we're melting. And we're not complaining about it, but we're melting. So, yeah, wherever you are listening, we hope you are keeping safe and well. But it is a two-person pod today. It is just myself and Olive. Poor Jay Sean had to deal with some mess at 3 o'clock in the morning in the house, so he's had to go to bed. So we'll soldier on in his honor. And we were just saying that we feel a little bit lucky that we didn't have to be cleaning up messes in the house at 3 a.m. So, Jay Sean, if you are tuning in, we hope you are doing okay. And we hope you go and get some rest, because you probably deserve it. But this week, Olive, we are going to be talking about how adversity can shape resilience, it can build character, and how it can help people figure out a purpose. And we're going to delve into all the little minutiae and little bits and pieces to see where we land with it from, I suppose, our own perspective, but what we see with the work that we do. And Caitlin's in the chat there on YouTube saying, do you want the rain threatening Ashington for a night? Yes, we do. No, I don't want the rain. I just want a little bit cooler. That's all. Just not the rain. But before we crack into it, Olive, how have you been keeping this week? Apart from melting, obviously.
I'm just melting. I'm finding that it's actually quite difficult to get anything very productive going, because you start doing something and you suddenly realize you're getting warmer and warmer. But I've had a lot of reading to do, so I've been doing that. I've been learning a lot from Dawson Church, who is I'm a fan of, and he's got a lot of very interesting stuff published. So I'm doing that.
Brilliant. I am currently reading one of your recommendations, Thomas G. West, Seeing What Others Cannot See, and I'm really enjoying it.
It's a brilliant book, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'd highly recommend it. And I think anybody could enjoy it. You don't have to have necessarily an affinity to neurodiversity to be able to enjoy it, but it's very, very fascinating to see the people throughout history who've been some of the greatest thinkers and the greatest minds, and seeing the challenges that they've had, but how they've been able to and I suppose this links into what we're talking about today. The difficulties they had, they didn't diminish the impact that they had. Whereas I suppose maybe a lot of the young people we've worked with, or people we've worked with over the years, maybe those challenges that they experienced did diminish the skills and the beauty and the creativity that these people had. So they necessarily didn't feel as that they've contributed maybe necessarily as much to the world as they would have liked to.
Yeah.
But I suppose, talk to me about adversity, Olive. Is it something that we should be avoiding, or does it help shape us? Is there an optimal amount of adversity that we should face? What is your thoughts on adversity in general, but also your experience as well, from, I suppose, your personal experience, but also within the work that you do?
There could be easier ways of working out what you. I mean, quite often you have an adversity. I'll just talk very briefly about my poor literacy when I was at school. I'd never be doing this work if it wasn't for the fact that I struggled. and was embarrassed about the fact I couldn't spell and read in school. And so but there is an easier and I suppose I'd say I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for that, if I hadn't experienced the adversity. On the other hand, there's easier ways to get onto something that really interests you rather than having to do it yourself. But a lot of people do it themselves, and they go through the mire, and that's what drives them on. There's some brilliant stories in that book. There's one, I can't remember who it was, so I can't remember that. But the one lovely story about a guy who invented something or other, and he ended up posthumously getting the Nobel Prize because nobody believed him while he was alive. But eventually, it came to fruition that it was true. And the stuff I'm reading of Dawson Churches about what happens to how your genes can be changed over time is absolutely fascinating. And he quotes several places where people have, for example, when the genome experiment first, everybody wanted to find out what was the gene that affected Parkinson's, what was the gene that affected literacy, what was the gene, and there was this big push to get a gene for everything, and it's not true. And it's like, and in his work he's done, and he's a great researcher, he's just basically saying, and that is not true.
Wow.
And so, but this is what is true, because this is what we're finding out more details about, because a decade goes by and we find out so much more stuff, and we have more technology that we can help us find out stuff. But that's what happens.
But if you think about it as well, like our understanding of the brain is in such infancy, in the grand scheme of humans on the earth. Like it's only probably 150 years really that proper research has been going on into the brain that is held with any kind of coherence. So like we're probably not even born yet. We're probably not even the sperm and the egg coming together yet in terms of understanding the brain. But yet we've come so far in the last 150 years.
Yeah.
And I think when I think about adversity myself, right, because I've run a lot of parenting programs, a lot of parents will say to me, how do you build resilience in our children? And I'll say, well, you have to let them fall down and pick themselves back up, because that's how they learn that they can pick themselves back up. But sometimes we might need to give them a little bit of assistance. But if somebody constantly fixes everything for us, we don't ever learn that we've got the capability and the skills to actually take care of ourselves. And that can be even on a muscular level. Like if we don't use our muscles, they don't perform as effectively. They don't grow as well as they need to be able to sustain us. So then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, I do think it's not as simple as just saying adversity is good or adversity is bad, because people can face significant adversity that significantly detrimentally impacts on their lives going forward as they grow. And I have worked with hundreds of young people over the years working in services provided for young people who are in trouble with the law. And they will be generally seen as troublemakers. They'll be seen as problem children. They'll be seen as people who are not going to amount to anything. And when I'm working with them, I'm seeing and hearing and reading about their background. And what a lot of them will have gone through, suffered, experienced in very young, impressionable childhood years, I can see why they may turn out where they don't have the ability to engage with society on a regular level. That also is granted that we do know right from wrong too, but it's never as simple or as black and white as they're just a bad kid or they're a good kid. So for me, I think we do need to face adversity. It is important for us to face adversity, but it's also important for us to be successful at times in overcoming that adversity. And for some of the young people that we work with who have dyslexia, dyscalculia, because of the structure of the system that they're in, they may not get those experiences of overcoming those challenges, which then builds that resilience and a belief that they can actually do it. So I think that can be challenging for them.
Exactly. You've got, and I mean, I always, whenever I coach as a student, I always start off with, what do you enjoy doing? What are you good at? And I get parents often looking at me slightly weird and going, I brought the child here because they've got loads of stuff they can't do. Why are you talking to them about what they can do? Because I want to know what challenges they found. You know, how did they become good at swimming? How did they become good at anything, at football or whatever it is? And how can we use some of those strengths that they've already got, those problem solving strengths? And, you know, when a child says, oh, well, I don't want to practice, and I go, well, when you learned to swim, did you practice? Or did you just fall in a swimming pool and it worked? And you know, how do you become fast at it? And the same thing is true of all the sports, football and whatever. And for that matter, any other subject you might want to go into. You know, the child who is really keen on dinosaurs will have been researching dinosaurs for ages and not given up. They've carried on wanting to know more. And I think that's the key, is first of all, get your child to be really interested in something. It doesn't actually matter what, as long as it's legal. And and get them to use that as a vehicle for problem solving or for whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the first children I ever taught, and I've probably given this story before on this call, was a child who was in special needs school and was sitting at the back of the classroom, tearing up bits of plastic and with his hands around the edges of where they were, and just shredding bits of plastic on the table. And I walked up to him and said, what are you doing? And he looked at me as I didn't know anything, you know. And I said, oh, is that a picture of a dinosaur you're making? And he goes, and he wasn't very verbal. And so the next thing I said to him, why have you got your hands like this around the edge of it? And he looked at me as if I was stupid and pointed to the open window. And I went, oh, if you move your hands, the bits will fly all over the place. Okay, so can you imagine this dinosaur? But luckily they had a hill of grass outside the window. I said, can you move it up onto the hill so you can see it better? And he goes, mm-hmm. And then I asked him, and then I showed him how to spell T-Rex and said, can you put the word on the side of the dinosaur? And he goes, yep. And I said, can you spell T-Rex? And lo and behold, he spelled Tyrannosaurus. And
Amazing.
that was purely because I got him on his specialist subject, and I didn't even show him how to spell Tyrannosaurus. He could do that because I got the wrong dinosaur. T-Rex was the wrong guy. And so, you know, if you can go to somewhere that they're really confident at and that they can do, then they will know how they ever became good at doing it. So they will be able to add on something else. In modern primary schools, it's called scaffolding, is that you get something that they're good at and then they can build on that.
It makes perfect sense, because if you look at architecture, what we all live in, the only way it works is when you build from the ground up
Yeah.
after a solid
Yeah.
foundation has been put in place. I was working with a young lad recently, and he was telling me he hated school. I think he was 10 or 11, hated school, and he couldn't learn. And I was like, "Oh, really? You can't learn?" He was like, No, I can't learn." So, like you, I said, "What are you interested in?" And he was like, "Well, I love football." I said, "Okay, so who's your favorite team?" And he said, "My favorite team." I hate even saying this, was Manchester United. I tried to convince him otherwise, but he said Manchester United. So I asked him, could he spell Manchester United? And he was like, "Well, yeah, of course." I was like, "Okay, go on." So he spelled Manchester, and then he spelled United. And while he was while he was doing that, um, I got an idea in my head. So he was getting spelling tests in school, and he was worried. He would worry every week. His mum was saying like he'd nearly be making himself sick on a Thursday evening because he had spelling tests on a Friday. And we picked 5 words that he needed to spell. So I got him to visualize a football crest. And then he said to me, "Can I draw them?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course you can." So he got out, I had pens and paper. So he drew out his um, football crests. And then, you know, the way in a lot of the crests, Olive, they'll have the name in it. That's how he knew how to spell Manchester United. Um, so he drew out the crests, colored them in, and then he wrote I think it was like, beautiful city, and then there was another one that was, I think, together, united. And so he drew out a picture for the 5 of them. I went, right, let's look at this. So we used those with his imaginary whiteboard, and he popped them up there, and he got 10 out of 10 on his spelling test on the Friday. And his mum phoned me in tears, going, "Oh my God, this is the first time in his history he has ever got anything over 5 in a spelling test, never mind getting 10." And it was just using that space to tap in to what he was interested in. And this kid had faced a lot of adversity. Like, he was making himself so sick with worry and anxiety every single week. And now all of a sudden, that is shifted into, okay, well, right now that's not a problem because I now have the solution. And because it worked for him, he was like, well, I can spell now. So that's absolutely fine. And I think, while we don't want kids to have to go through long periods of time of experiencing that, but they will be experiencing it earlier than it will probably become apparent to a teacher or a parent, more than likely.
Yeah.
So they will probably be experiencing that adversity before you know it as a parent or if you're a teacher. So tapping into the interest and using that as the vehicle for them to actually learn the information that you need them to learn gives them a better chance of being successful. And it is amazing how belief systems can be shifted so quickly in children with a bit of confidence based on real success that they experience for themselves.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, when did you realize that I can read now, I can spell now? Like, what was the point for you that you went, this is no longer something that is an adversity to me?
I'll give you a bit of background. I mean, I left school with a head teacher's report that said it'd be useful if I could learn to spell. I went and did a maths degree because that avoided most of spelling and reading, I thought. And then I became a software engineer, which, when you think about it, when I think about it now, it's like that isn't what I'd have chosen to do, because you still got an awful lot of reading and writing. But on the other hand, back in the day when I learnt, it was lots of things like machine code and stuff like that, that I that was not complicated words, were but rigorous. You saw the same word over and over again,
Mm.
and so it wasn't complicated. And the it wasn't until, and this is now when I was 50 or something like that, I did. I went on a training course and for something else, and they did a demonstration of how to spell visually, and I was absolutely dumbfounded. So I knew I couldn't do what other people did on that training course, because some people stood up on the stage and clearly looked up and saw words. Other people looked at the floor and felt embarrassed. And if I'd been on the stage, I would have looked on the floor and felt embarrassed. And so I knew then, which was in my 50s, I knew that I wasn't doing the scheme that other people did who were successful at spelling and reading. And so I went to my local special needs school and asked where I happened to know the deputy head teacher, and asked if I could borrow some students and teach them. And he said, we've got umpteen who can't spell and read. So I started teaching them. And in 15 minutes a week for like 6 weeks, I could teach them how to do it. And so, and then in amongst that, I started teaching myself, and I was getting better and better at it, but I wasn't perfect at it. And I suppose the great measure was during COVID, which is only 6 years ago now. I started reading an awful lot more. And during COVID, because we weren't going anywhere, I was doing an awful lot more reading. And I remember reading one book, and I went, well, when I was at school, I could only read a couple of pages before I went to sleep. And now I can read 350 pages in a weekend. And that's the difference it made to me.
And so, like, you're reading more now. Was it that moment that you saw those people spelling? Did that change things for you on a personal level,
Yeah.
outside of the teaching the students?
Yeah. I mean, I was furious. I went, when we had a coffee break, and I went round at the coffee break going, can you do this? And of course, some people said they could, and some people said they couldn't. And I went, this is ridiculous. I have no idea what the man's talking about. And so it wasn't until I literally 2 days later started teaching in special needs school that because I was teaching it, I could see how it worked. And I found that everybody I taught could do it. But nobody I came across. I have an interesting statistic. There isn't anybody that I've come across who has a dyslexia diagnosis who is reliably visualizing words. They might be visualizing the odd word, but many of them are just going, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mm.
And so it's 100% of people. So if you have a dyslexic person with a dyslexia diagnosis, just ask them if they can spell giraffe, look up and see a giraffe, the word giraffe. If they can't, then they're not doing this skill, and it's totally teachable.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is totally teachable. And like, some of the most important pieces are not the actual teaching when it comes to working with young people. It is the relationship building. That
Yeah,
is the pivotal, most important piece. Children
yeah,
need to feel safe, they need to trust, and they need to feel like you see them for who they are as a human being, above and beyond what they've achieved or not achieved inside or outside of school. So
Yeah.
having that space and providing that space of safety is so, so important for any neurodiversity, actually for any child,
Yeah.
full stop. And
Totally.
once you get them to trust you, you will be able to work with them, and they will work with you much more easily than if they don't trust you. So that's something that's very, very important. And this week I am delivering 4 modules on understanding and working with neurodiverse children to a group of sports science students in a university. And it has been fascinating, the conversations that have been happening with them, because I'm not just going to talk to them or at them for 2 hours. It is very much a conversation piece and discussing things. But we talked a bit about assumptions that teachers can have and that individuals can have. And a lot of them would draw on their experience of what teachers would say about those kids who were likely to have been neurodiverse, but nobody necessarily knew. And it was troublemaker, disruptive, can't grasp this subject. And this was their experience in school, and they're all now university students. But I was emphasizing with them that the safety piece is upmost in everything, and how we can make them feel safe. Because we can say, yes, you're safe, but that doesn't mean that they feel safe. But it's through our actions. It is through seeing them as human beings. It is through acknowledging what they're interested in. What are you interested in? All of a sudden, they are hearing, I am a person who has worth and value and something interesting enough for somebody to ask me about it. And even if you are an expert in the thing that they bring up, just ask questions,
Mm.
because that's where the power lies.
Even if it's online games,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it is. I remember when the PlayStations first came out, and I'd get them to explain to me, I don't know, whatever they were that was the latest fan of, and I just say, oh well, I don't understand anything about that. Can you explain it to me? And of course they did.
Mhm.
I had the under-12 chess champion for Hertfordshire at one point in my office, who was just amazing. I said, how are you good at chess? And he went, don't know. And I went, well, come on, tell me what you do when you sit down with a chessboard with somebody else. And he starts going, oh, well, I can imagine that I'm going to put my piece from here to here, and he's going to move his queen from there to there, and I'm going to move my pawn from there to there. And it was like, it was a 10-minute discussion on what he want, and he could visualize all this stuff. Amazing skills to visualize all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he was really easy to teach to spell and read, because he got good visual skills, but he had no idea that he could use his skills with chess to spell words.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? We're trying to show the young people that we work with that they can take their interests and the things that they're good at, and they are transferable skills. And even like, forget about kind of neurodiversity. Like, even when I'd be working with teenagers, say, who are building out a CV or a resume, and I'll say to them, so what have you done? And without fail, I get nothing. I go, okay, so you've done nothing. Right, let's just actually delve into that. Have you ever babysat for your younger brother or sister or niece or nephew? Well, yeah, I've done that. Okay, so you've been a babysitter, right? And have you ever helped your granny carry in the shopping from the car? Yeah, I've done that. And have you cleaned up Yeah, okay. And have you ever like helped out at your local youth club with younger kids or in school? Well, yeah, I'll help coach my brother's football team at times. Okay. And you slowly start to build out the skills that they have, that you have evidence to back it up. So it's not made up. And then you start to look at, well, how can that transfer into the working world? And it's amazing how powerful it is.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. Talk to me again, Olive, about how can we support young people or even adults to experience adversity, not take over or fix it for them, but be there as that structure that they can lean on if need be, without disempowering them from learning how to manage something themselves.
I think it's about. I mean, there's an expression called pacing and leading. It's about understanding where they're coming from and making sure that they understand, that you understand where they're coming from. So, if they've got problems with literacy or anything, sport or whatever it is, that you understand what they are telling you, and you are not trying to fix it for them. You're trying to help them develop their own problem solving skills. So it's about questions. It's not about fixing. It's about asking them, well, have you thought, what have you tried so far? And how did that work? How did that play out? And sometimes they'll go, yeah, well, I tried that, but that was a near miss. That was I was really confident about that one, and it didn't actually work out. And so, how near a miss was it? So it's about asking them questions, and it's about helping them solve problems. Without, I mean, I have an expression which is without falling down the rabbit hole, because if you fall down the rabbit hole, you're absolutely stuck. And what you want to be able to do is, okay, you've experienced something, but what can you learn from it? And what could that actually, what could you gain from life, from that experience?
Yeah.
I think it's where they're coming from, and it's about going to where they're coming from and trying to help them shift in some direction. And if you talk about adversity and is it valuable? Well, it is, because if you've learned how to get over one problem, you can probably learn how to get over another problem. And so that's where the adversity is useful, but you don't want to drop down the rabbit hole and go, this is all impossible.
Yeah. And like, I suppose if you break it down into simplified elements, like most parents will teach their children how to tie their shoelaces. So that's what most parents will do. But if you think back, in reality, it would have always been quicker and more effectively achieved if you had done it for them.
Yeah.
But you don't do it because you want them to learn that skill for themselves. But what you do is you don't just tell them this is what you do. You get your 2 bunny ears and then you do this and you do this. What you do is you show them and then you let them practice.
Yeah.
And yet, if we look at how education works in a lot of subjects, it is, I'll tell you, and then you take notes, and then you should understand. And yet, in the real world, we don't teach our children how to cook by giving them instructions. We oversee them over the pan and we walk them through what to do, because that makes perfect sense, so they don't burn the bloody house down. These,
And it's about helping them find ways to move them forward.
yeah, because I tie my shoelaces different to any other person except my mother. Seriously. And like, my wife and my children laugh at me at how I tie my shoelaces. And you would probably think, Alan, how do you tie your shoelaces different to anybody else? But I do, apparently. But that was the way my mother showed me how to tie my shoelaces. So she and I are the only people I know who tie our shoelaces in this particular fashion, which is different to what the rest of the world seems to do to tie their shoelaces. But it works for me. My shoelaces generally don't come undone. So I think if we look at then building that out, we've got how to ride a bike, how to change a tire on a car, how to cook a meal, how to get on a bus by yourself and be okay, and get off at the other end and go to where you need to go and be okay, and how to go and work in a real life environment where mum or dad aren't there just to make sure nobody gives out to you or shouts at you. Or so we are experiencing levels of adversity on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's the challenge comes from, in my experience, more so our perception of ourselves in relation to that adversity. So how many times, Olive, have you come across a young person who says, I can't do that?
Oh, innumerable.
Yeah. And for me, I'll always get them to add the word yet at the end.
Yeah.
Because that is a supportive thing. And like you said, well, what have you tried? Okay, so that didn't work. Is that the only way to achieve the outcome that you want?
Yeah.
Like, if you're building out a jigsaw, do you have to start at one particular corner? And if you don't get that one particular corner done, no, this isn't happening. This jigsaw can't be done. Absolutely not. So there's
Yeah.
always
I
so many
mean,
different ways.
if you look back at, I mean, most kids have been really successful at jigsaws.
Yeah.
In point of fact, I mean, there's not many kids around who would go, I can't, impossible. I can't do jigsaws.
Yeah.
They might say I can only do easy ones or something, but there's a few that would say they couldn't do them at all. And it's just building on that skill. And I was also thinking it's about knowing why you should keep trying to do something you're trying to do. What's the object? You know,
Yeah.
A finished jigsaw might be the object. It might be all sorts of things, but it might be building Lego or whatever it is. But there's reasons for developing this skill.
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about it, like you mentioned, online games or computer games, like
Yep.
most people don't plug a new game in or turn a new game on and complete it on the first go.
No, exactly. So how do they go about doing that?
And what they do is they acknowledge their achievement every time they get past the previous place that they couldn't get past. And they'll acknowledge themselves and go, yes, I did it.
Yeah.
Now, that might be only a fleeting, momentary experience, but they've done it. And it is about process. And unfortunately, we live in a world now that encourages us to think of the immediacy of everything. So we should have everything at our fingertips. I want something, I should get it. But that's not true mastery. It's not true. It's not true life. Things that usually are worthwhile do take time. They do take iterations. They do take repetition. They do take failure in order to come back. And actually, one of the most enjoyable stories in that Thomas G. West book is when he was talking about the researcher friend of his, I think in Canada, and his researcher friend was like, I don't like this story getting told, but it's okay, you can put it into the book. But essentially one of his students was trying to destroy DNA. And what she did was she'd test it and she'd do what she was doing to destroy it, and then she'd come back and she'd check it, and she'd find that it had actually multiplied. She's like, oh, I can't believe this. And then she'd go back and she'd try a different way to destroy it, and then she'd come back and she'd go, oh my God, it's multiplied. And then everyone around, all the other professors and researchers were trying to help her out, and every single time she would go to destroy the DNA and it would multiply. And then it got to the point where she was like, no, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Forget about it. And then a number of years later, somebody won the Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize for
Science prize or something.
science.
Yeah.
Yeah. For discovering how to multiply
Yep.
DNA. And it was just the parameters that she had placed herself in
The
that
question.
she felt like she was failing all the time, and that she had failed. And yet what she actually had from a different perspective was something worthy of a Nobel Prize. And I was really glad that he did get permission to share that story, because that is a lot of the time the challenge that we experience. It is the perception rather than, or the frame of reference that we have may not actually be the right question that we're asking.
Yeah, I'll give you another story about that. I go and paint. I go to an art class every Wednesday. It isn't really a class. We're not taught how to do anything. We just go along and we pick a subject and we have a cup of tea and we all do this subject roughly. And we don't have to all do it the same thing. And it's really interesting to watch what people do when they are painting, drawing, doing whatever they are. And so they, some people, a lot of people, they'll give us a topic in advance, and a lot of people prepare for the topic by taking along a picture, and then they copy the picture, which is totally fine, totally fine. That's what they want to do. I go along there and I make up a picture out of my imagination. And it's, I might get an idea to start with from something or other, but I basically do it out of my imagination. Now, there's a great advantage to that, is that you can't mark yourself.
Okay.
Because if you're copying another picture, you can say, well, it's not as good as that, or the color's not as good, or whatever it is. With my imagination, there is no possibility that I can mark myself. I can look at it and go, that's a reasonable picture, but I can't go, the original one was better than that.
Yeah.
And we take turns in this class to choose the subject. So when it came along to my subject to be chosen, I said, an imaginary sports day on an animal farm.
Fantastic.
And go, now you can't, well, you might be able to ask Google for that, but it's not going to be terribly good. But, and so everybody went along and they started doing stuff out of their imagination. And one girl said to me, she said, I'm really struggling with this. But by the time she got to the end of the session, she was loving it. And the next time she said, I'm going to start doing this quite often. It's just drawing out of my imagination now.
Wow.
But we are so programmed in school to do, even with art, which doesn't necessarily have a right answer, we are programmed in school to go, let's get the right answer. And so that it takes us all through life that, if we draw a map for somebody of, where somebody lives, or something really simple like that, they might well go, oh, it's not very good, but it's coming out of your imagination. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I love that. Caitlin's just put in the chat there that, Alan, you've just described my Tomb Raider method. There you go. So Tomb Raider's a game. But I think it really is the outcome bias that we have. So the outcome has to be a particular way or achieve a certain thing in order for us to see it as having worth and value. But yet that's just not how things go.
So I mean, that's just, the whole testing, assessment, examination system drives us down that route.
Yeah, it's just a learned behavior.
That's the way we, get rewarded. I remember having a discussion with my son when he was taking his GCSEs about other kids being rewarded for if they got an A star or whatever it was. And I went, no, I think I'm rewarding you for how hard you're working. I actually couldn't care less what you get as a result.
Yeah, but that, like over here in Ireland, every year on the front page of either the Irish Times or the Irish Independent, one of the biggest national newspapers, they put up photographs of the kids who got the highest marks in the Leaving Certificate. And I'm not saying they don't deserve, recognition for what they've done, but maybe they didn't work as hard as some of the other people.
Yep. And at the end of the day, when they go on to do something for a job, or they go on for a career of whatever it's going to be, they might be phenomenally more successful. Other people might be phenomenally more successful, because we do only measure some very strict, effectively academic skills. There's the odd thing thrown in like art, but there isn't very much. We are just measuring things that, I mean, it's the way assessment works, isn't it? There's the bottom third group, there's the top third group, and there's everybody else in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's how we measure people. And you hear so many people these days who really have been very successful and have had very rough education. It hasn't been that successful. They've had challenges all the way along, but they finally found their niche. And I think it's about finding your niche. And another thing about finding your niche is you're not going to have one for life.
No. And that's okay.
And that is totally okay and totally normal. And I mean, I was a software engineer from until I was 50, roughly. And I've been a coach since then, and I've developed all this stuff about learning differences. And so I haven't had a job for life. And if I'd still been a software engineer today, I think I'd be really not pleased with myself.
Yeah. I think that is the thing. We have to stop thinking about a career as something that we pick at 16, 17, 18. And
Much too young.
Yeah. Like, and like I get young people coming to me who are really suffering with anxiety because they don't know what they're going to do. And they feel like the rest of the world knows what it's going to do, and their friends do. And their parents are saying, you got to pick something. And the teacher's saying, you got to pick something. And it's like, I don't know what I want to do. I just want to play computer games. And it's like everyone tells me, like, I need to pick something. I don't know what to do. And it's like, you don't have to have the answers right now.
Yeah, Jason and I were talking last week on the subject, and I maybe he said, I would love that when the kids get to the end of schooling, then they have a 2-year gap where they just have the opportunity to go off and try things. Might be in businesses, might be in the theatre, might be anywhere, before they actually sign up for a job, as it were. But a sort of, I can't remember what he called it. If you listen to last week's, it was on there, a sort of floating job. And I think, something like that, where people can try things out, would be absolutely great. And it's a bit like the gap year. You try things out there.
Yeah. Could we introduce that into schools where instead of sitting in a class for 9 months of the year, that maybe for 2-3 months of the year, you get to go out and you get to do work experience from first year right through to sixth year. So you actually build up a huge amount of it, skills on your CV or your resume.
Yeah.
And then you've got a better picture of what the outside world looks like instead of just 2 weeks in transition year.
Yeah.
Olive, we're going to bring it to a close.
Righty-ho.
So talk to me about the importance of hope, perspective, recognizing growth, recognizing that it often comes through challenges. So what's the upside of this conversation, talking about adversity?
I don't think you need huge adversity to drive you on. You just need some inspiration, really, as to what possibilities. I'll give you another story very quickly. When my son went to a career session at school when he was, 15 or something like that, he came home and he said, "Mum, a career is awful. It's like, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker." And he said, whatever versions they'd offered him, he said, "I don't want to do any of that, lot. Am I a complete failure, already?" Because, and he ended up being a historian and an academic, but that wasn't on the list,
Yeah.
and so he couldn't. He was already a failure when I think and also Jason and I were talking last week about having in the school having the opportunity to learn about career transition, and that you aren't going to have a career for life, and that you if you've got some skills to help you with career transition, that would be really useful.
Absolutely. I work with people on transitioning from work to retirement, because that can be really, really challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's really important. But yeah, I hope people don't see the conversation on adversity as a negative and see it more as a learning. By challenging ourselves, we get growth. I'll go back to
Inspiration.
Yes, I'll go back to it 50 million times. You go to the gym, you lift weights. What actually happens? You tear your muscle fibers and they grow back bigger and stronger. You have to go through the pain of the tear for the benefit of the strength and power that you want. So that's what we need to do.
But you might be able to do it in an easier way.
You might. Absolutely. Olive, listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. We will be back next week with another Future Proof Knowledge podcast.
And
episode
you
50.
realize 50.
Yeah, 50. That is fantastic. We'll be back for that one next week. Take care.
Okay.
FPK, Future Proof Knowledge Podcast. Mind unlocked. With every episode we cast real talk, real tools, wisdom on the fly. Tune in, geek out, reach for the sky. FPK, Future Proof.